welcome to Industry Insights Webinars Interviews. And I'm here today with Neal Conlon. And Neal, tell us a little bit about your expertise and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. Really good to reconnect with you, and I'm glad to be here today for this. So I've kind of built this career, professional career, over being a military veteran slash highly skilled technical product person, and being able to navigate and kind of stay on the, I don't know, cutting edge of all the new things and understand new things like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, blockchain, um, and being able to navigate that. And I've spent a lot of my time, especially in the cybersecurity and data security space as well.
Great. And I understand that you have some experience in national security as well. Can you tell us maybe the difference between how you approach national security versus standard data security?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first left the military, I've tried to navigate outside of the national security space, and I always seem to get pulled back into it in some way. And it's a place that's near and dear to me for obvious reasons. Um, you know, we used to be a country that only had to defend its physical borders, and now with the uh, world of data, and the platforms we use, there are platforms like Facebook and Amazon, Verizon, and a bunch of other large organizations that many facets of their data actually lives outside of the United States. And it's become one of the most mission critical things. Our infrastructure of our country is no longer just roads and bridges. It's a big piece of it is tied to every single thing that we do on these devices, like the ones we're recording on. Where does that data go? What are the laws that are impacted by it? And then how do we store it, save it, use it? Who can use it? Who's got access to it? And it's a very different conversation than just storing something on a computer in your house or in your office.
And I think of a lot of it kind of boils down to a topic that you discussed in one of our previous conversations about the liquidity of data. Can you expand on that for us and tell us how that plays in with the data lakes?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because people tend to think of data as, you know, I don't know, a single dimension. And, I've been working inside complex data organizations and done everything from algorithmic trading to frequency trading to all these different places where data has um, multiple dimensions to it. And so with that comes the fact that it's kind of got it's more the way for people to look at it is more of like liquid, and the liquidity of it, because if it has multiple dimensions, it has multiple values to it, multiple currencies to it, and therefore it's a lot different if you're storing a single dimension document, right? You take a piece of paper and you want to secure that piece of paper. All you got to do is put it in a file drawer and under lock and key, and you're the only one's got the key. But if it's got a liquidity to it, um, and it lives in different places, and especially with COVID, the velocity at which cloud has now progressed on, and the need for more and more cloud gives it this kind of three-dimensional need for multiple layers of security, who's got access, when they had access, how they can use it, and stuff like that is uh, needed more than ever.
And so when it comes to cleansing a database, let's say someone does have these data lakes, how often should that be done? And are there any best practices that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to look at staying in that thread, right? Looking at data as a liquid versus just a piece of paper, right? It's like cleaning out your pool, right? It needs to be, depending on how often you're using it, depending how many people are in it, depending how you uh, how you use it. You need to put some best practices in place. Um, just like any other liquid, right? The pool, I think, is a really good example. But best practices for it, I think, is like you need to know, who is in your data, right? How often they're using it, what they're using it for, and then be able to pick up on the anomalies of like if someone else is in there, right? Like if someone else, if too many people are in there, if too many people are using it and it's being edited and stuff like that. So I think it comes down to putting a good framework in place, having the right compliance measures in place, and then having the right tools around it to support that strategy.
And then part of that is probably accessing that data, which kind of comes into the multi-factor identification. Is having those multi-factor identification steps enough of a precaution, or are there other steps that are necessary as far as assigning access and allowing that process to take place?
Um, I, I I think it's a good start, right? I mean, it's like I think a really good example is everybody who's ever had a professional career has shared an Excel sheet with somebody, and somebody else has altered that Excel sheet, and they never knew who did it, why they did it, and therefore the whole spreadsheet just falls apart after that. Um, I really believe that the ability for you to measure, monitor, and manage, right, who has access to your data constantly is a huge first level start to being able to, have control over what it is that's going on. Um, Having multiple versions of that is probably a best practice where that's where, you know, a password and a login and some other form of multi-factor authentication, a password and login and some kind of biometric, space or something like that. But having at least one, two, or three ways to identify that, but also being able not to make the user experience painful to get into, as we've all seen, like getting into systems and having to verify and verify and verify. By the time I get in there, I actually forgot what I wanted to do sometimes.
And then, and to that same respect, what about the networks? How big of a role does the network play in needing protection? And what about the network access control?
Yeah, so I mean, the term in the industry that many folks may be familiar with, some folks may not, is north, south, east, and west, right? So east and west being inside your infrastructure, right? You have control over those things generally. North and south being, a cloud, a public cloud, a cloud you're working with, a cloud you pay for out in the world. Again, going back to this use case, this idea that data is a liquid being poured from, you know, cloud to cloud to cloud into your infrastructure, however it's set up. Um, there's a responsibility there that while the cloud providers will provide the space or the bucket for your data to flow into, I think that business owners and entity owners need to have kind of an extreme ownership responsibility, that they have to know who's going into that data, what's going on with the data, who's got access to it, when they could access it, and if it's being edited or changed by a machine or by a human, they need to be able to monitor and measure that, especially if their business, has implications out into the world, like a financial services, a telecom infrastructure, or something like that.
And then what challenges have you experienced when it comes to like legacy systems or older versions of hardware and software? Is that a challenge for you, or does that really not affect the process for data security as much?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a big challenge, right? Because if you look at it again, like this data is a liquidity thing. It's like having your liquid in it, having your old pool, right? It's why many old systems remain in place, because stakeholders are afraid of what's going to happen when they transition that data into other places. So it's easier for the data to leak out in older systems. It's easier for people to take advantage of them because they don't have a lot of the smart infrastructures that are in place sometimes, or the smarter tools can't be put into place. Um, One thing I've seen that's been very interesting is in the threat intelligence community. Um, Many companies are now starting to leverage what's called flow data, and this idea of flow data in order for them to identify data leakages, surges, anomalies, blind spots, and stuff like that has become a very powerful, cost-effective, better, quicker, more efficient way to identify challenges with data security.
Can you tell us some of the weaknesses that you're seeing as far as some things that organizations should pay special attention to make sure that that's covered with some kind of security precautions?
Yeah, some of the big ones I'm seeing are blind spots are the big one. A lot of traditional scanning devices are not capable of covering the entire infrastructure. And lots of when tools are layered on top of other tools and layered on top of other tools, they create these blind spots. Um, so different control settings from firewall to firewall tend to be a really big one because they can be exploited. I think password management still remains one of the biggest challenges because, the ability to hack an intern's personal email and then hack their work email because they use the same password for work and for college is an easy tool that is still leveraged every single day today. Um, the ability system admins, who are meant to be the gatekeepers, exploiting the infrastructure, because they want to play Call of Duty or mine Bitcoin, is becoming a huge thing. So having, management systems and processes over your system admins is a big one. Um, and then another big one that just seems to be happening all the time is, the bigger the infrastructure, the more likely it is for you to have little small things that turn into big problems because it's hard to identify those blind spots. That's where that threat intelligence and kind of scanning to see where you may be seeing data leak out of things, especially in the IoT space. The IoT space, there's the ability for data leakage to happen significantly.
And so we're going to be talking about a lot of those connected devices and IoT solutions during the actual webinar. But I was looking at in my research, I noticed that there are also a lot of risks surrounding smart cameras. How can a smart camera be used for cybercrime?
Yeah, that's a really great question. All of the IoT, Bluetooth devices, right? It's well documented. Like there was challenges with lots of um, Amazon smart devices early on, and so a lot of those cameras um, are built in order to satisfy the customer by providing good camera footage, right? They are not. Um, they are not built to be very secure devices. So there's abilities to take advantage of the IP address if they're tied to an IP address. If they build up their own network in order for them to transfer files, you can exploit their network. Um, and there's a multitude of different ways that they can be exploited depending on how they're built. But ideally, if they have the ability to transmit over any um, path, network, whatever you want to call it, then there's an opportunity there for them to be exploited.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Neil, and sharing some of this additional strategies and this information with us. Is there any final tip you'd like to give our audience on ways to secure their data security and overall their just protection for their networks and every aspect of data security?
Yeah, I think the quick easy one is I'm a huge advocate in always having a third party person look from the outside in because somebody who doesn't have the ego tied to the build of things is always going to be able to point out something that you're not going to be able to see. So that's a blanket tip that works for everybody.
Well, thank you so much. And if they want more information or to reach you for one of their data security needs, how would they do so?
Yeah, so I've got a website, www.nealconlon.com. Also on most social media channels, I am Neal Conlon, and I'm pretty responsive there. Thanks for
Well,
doing this,
thank you,
Tiffany.
Neil. And we'll talk to you more soon. Thank you so much.